So I sound like to everybody. I feel like I'm on a Arsenio Hall show or something. So thank you all for those who have stayed behind. And we don't make it's not mandatory, but we just for those believers who want to be a part of this. And this is our I Have a Testimony series, where pretty much anybody that comes to the city of a believer, we have the opportunity. We do it, especially those who have served, and have had certain experiences. So we thank you for being willing to be our next participant, because prior to you, in fact, last Sunday, Brother Akbar was here. And the whole purpose of this is like in the scriptures it says that Satan was defeated by the blood of the Lamb and the power of the testimony. Yes. And I had the opportunity to sit around the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he talked about how he doesn't really have the opportunity to hear our stories. And I believe that we all have a story, and so hence that's why we're doing these testimonies, and for historical purposes, because years down the line, this video will be what historians will call a primary source. So for those who don't know, this is our brother Dawud Muhammad. He's the former student minister of one of the historic mosques in the city, in the Nation of Islam, Mosque number 1. Yes, so thank you, my brother.
It's my pleasure.
Yes, sir. So we're going to get right down to it. How did you come to accept the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
It was in 1981. I was attending Lincoln University. I had a very interesting experience, though. Actually, my initial exposure to the minister was on a cassette tape.
Okay.
I had a music teacher in high school, and he encouraged my friends and I to go see the minister. And I wasn't going unless all my partners were going. We was like, yeah, well, let's see if we'll go. We didn't end up going. So I missed seeing the minister. He was speaking at Wayne State University, which is in Detroit proper. But this was in the early 1970s. This had to be late 77, early 78. So I didn't go, but I played upright bass at the time, and we were doing a thing at a university, and he was taking a group of us to perform. On the way back, he played a cassette of the minister. It's a cassette that he recorded himself, because again, this was the early days. The audio video department at that time was usually Brother Joshua, the minister's son. In fact, he's the one who started the tape ministries. That was Brother Joshua. And in this early year, I know this is not good for camera, but I don't need this thing on. And I felt this buzz, pardon me. So this was one of those venues in the early days where folk recorded, they sometimes allowed it, and my music teacher, he documented everything, and he had one of those little cassette recorder players, and he set it near the minister. He recorded it. He recorded the minister on a cassette player that had batteries that were low on power. Consequently, it recorded the minister slower, so the playback, the minister's voice sounded like a munchkin.
Wow.
It was just going really fast, right? Not quite like Alvin and them, but close.
Right.
But the talk was so substantive, despite the distortion of his voice, that it moved me, and I was like kicking myself, thinking, man, I should have went to see that man. And that put me on a journey. I had an aunt who, she had a hardcover edition of Autobiography of Malcolm X. And she let me borrow it, started reading it. When it got to Malcolm leaving the nation, I lost interest in the book. Wow. I never finished it. Wow. And I put the book down. Of course, I saw different videos on Malcolm, and he was like the one I was watching. Go off to Lincoln University in Missouri. While at Lincoln, my music teacher, who was a graduate of Lincoln, in fact, he used to have his own little mini black college tour. He would take a busload of students down every year to Lincoln. And, we would stay the weekend, and basically it was a recruiting move to try and get more students to go to his alma mater. And so I did end up going on one of those trips and deciding to go to Lincoln. Well, after about a year or two, he had teacher burnout. Anybody's in education, if you work in so-called urban America, teaching can wear you out. And he was worn out. So he decided he wanted to go back to college and get another degree. So he came back to his alma mater, and my music teacher became my classmate.
Wow.
And he was on student council at the time. And while on student council, he convinced the student council to bring Minister Farrakhan. And the minister accepted the invitation, and uniquely, the minister wasn't inclined to do an invitation for speaking engagement so close to Savior's Day. This is Savior's Day 81. I didn't make it to Savior's Day 81, but this was several days before. Yes, before Savior's Day 81. This was February 19th, 1981, at Richard L. Jones Auditorium, scheduled for 7. Minister got there about 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Wow.
Auditorium was packed. The minister gave a very powerful lecture. Lincoln University was a historically black college. We were not the studious college. We had kind of a party campus atmosphere. Lucky if you got the bid passed by 11:30, just for folk playing their music, folk hanging out, whatever. Remember my first experience on the campus going into the area that was called the Blue Room. It wasn't the cafeteria for the meal plan. It was like if you were paying cash. Walked in there, jukebox blaring, folk playing blackjack and spades. I was like,
wow.
Dang, this is college, huh? So it was that kind of environment. The minister spoke so powerfully that that was probably the most peaceful night on the campus. Wow. He had shook people so tough that, you know, the campus, the whole vibe on the campus was like completely 360.
Wow.
Not that everybody became Muslim, but he at least cracked the consciousness. And I knew when I heard him, I got to hear him again. And at that time, Jefferson City is where Lincoln University is in Missouri. And I can't remember, I think it's about an hour and a half away from St. Louis. And Brother Akbar, he was the minister of the mosque in East St. Louis.
Wow.
And so when I went home, I was so excited that I was sharing, all I could talk about was Minister Farrakhan. And my girlfriend at that time, her sister said, well, that man y'all talking about, I think they sell his album downtown. The album, of course, for the younger people, album is made out of vinyl. It's not used like an instrument. Back then, you actually just let it play. I ain't mad at you, though, if you can scratch. But so it was a double album set, and it was called Where Is Your Head? That was the lecture he gave at Jack the Rapper's Family Affair. Jack the Rapper was a radio personality, and he was in the music industry, and he would have an annual gathering in Atlanta, Georgia, of all of the radio on-air personalities, recording industry people, and all of that. He would have the Jack the Rapper Family Affair. Well, one of the people he had to keynote for their big dinner was the minister. And the minister gave a lecture titled, Where Is Your Head?, where he talked about the responsibility of those who are on the air and how the air is sacred, and how if you're a DJ, what you should be feeding your people, right? Very powerful lecture. So it was a 2-album set, 3 sides, because you flipped it over. On a vinyl, you had an A side and a B side. Or if you had a double album set, you had side 1, 2, 3, and 4. And on the 4th side was the minister's composition, Heed the Call, y'all. Wow. It's easy to tell. White man's heaven is a black man's hell. Exquisite recording, and I'm really a music head, period. Doesn't matter what the music, but if it's really good, it's done well, then you got me. So to hear the minister playing a violin over some congas, I was like, now that's different. And then the voices come in, and then it's symphonic, but it's got that deep R&B kind of feel to it, and it's got a jazz feel. It's just an incredible album. So I bought it. Needless to say, that friend said where the album was. I went and bought it. When I went to the place to buy the album, the brother that was at a jewelry store this brother had, who was in the nation, and one of his employees said, oh, you're interested in Minister Farrakhan? I said, yeah. He said, well, he's coming tonight to speak. And he gave me the address and the time. And so I made my way there. And that was in like late May of '81. By June of '81, I embraced the teachings and went back to Lincoln University. This time, I was Student Government Association president. And there was a lot of controversy because folk knew me because they had just voted me in as student government president. But I come back clean shaven, bow tied. It's like, what has happened to him? And so one of the headlines in the school paper is SGA president, black Muslim controversy or something. Interestingly, all of the students from Africa, we had a sizable Nigerian, Ethiopian, Ghanaian, had some folk from Lesotho and other parts of the continent. But particularly, I noticed the Nigerians and Ghanaians, they were completely outraged that the controversy was that I was Muslim. They didn't like that I was attacked simply because I embraced Islam. So I was a controversial SGA president, but I was an effective one. At the end of my little run, one of my professors told me, you scared everybody. They didn't know what you were going to do next. Wow. My biggest thing I did, which by Allah's grace I was able to do, the minister was speaking at Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis. I wanted the students to go. So I rented some school buses, used SGA funds. We're going to go up and see the minister. At the 11 o'clock hour, I get a call from the dean of students. He says, he was an old military man. He loved me, but he had to follow the rules. He said, you know, you can't take students with student government money to a religious event. That you can't do that. You can't rent the buses. You can't pay for that. I'm just here to tell you. They used to talk like that. His name was Dean Jesse Johnson. And Dean Johnson said, but you know, I understand what you're dealing with. And he pulled a drawer open and pulled out Fall of America. He said, now what you can do, if another student organization wants to sponsor the event, you can do that. But you can't do it. And I can't tell you what to do, but that's the rules.
Gave you a little guidance.
He put me in motion. Had a friend who was the president of the Student Social Workers Organization. She got her social worker group to sponsor the event. We took 2 busloads of students up to St. Louis to see the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So that was, you know, I was very thankful I could do that. And finish college. I wanted so badly, and this is why I think it's so important. If you got young brothers and sisters who are in college, you need to encourage them to stay. Not tell them you don't need nothing but the teachings. The teachings can be found everywhere, and that includes colleges and universities last time I checked. And we need everybody in every field of endeavor that is a benefit to the building of a nation and a benefit to our people. But I was so just determined. I wanted to go back and work in Detroit and help with the guidance. I did not have I really did not go to college thinking I was going to get a degree. I think your talk this morning was so important because any doubt you have at all can really ill affect your future if you really don't see your ability and your capabilities and you don't face your fears. And I was one of those who had an immature understanding of how to get this work done. But even in my immaturity, Allah covered me, and I thank Allah. So moving back to Detroit, and by that time I was married to who was at that time my girlfriend. And we had our first 2 children within the first few years of still being there in Missouri. We moved back to Detroit, and that's where I began to help in the student ministry in about '85. At that time, you all may remember Brother Abdul Hakim Muhammad, who was over in Huntsville.
He just passed?
He just passed, and in fact, I was blessed to express my love and appreciation for him from what I was told through Brother Rasul, who spoke to his wife. She said, I think I was the last one to speak to him. Wow. But I was thankful to Allah. I could thank him for what he had given me as a student and helper. He, at that time, this was '85, I moved back to Detroit. The minister had brought him in back in '81 when I was, and I'm kind of all over the place, but in '81 when that brother told me the minister was speaking, I went that night. Well, back then the minister was rebuilding. They weren't out just passing out flyers saying, "Come to mosque number 1." Back then, when the minister was coming to your city, you got a phone call because he was, again, rebuilding. And where there was great opposition out there, we heard a few weeks ago how the minister went to the former governor of Illinois, and he told the minister to stay in the public, you know, as it relates to his life possibly being in danger for rebuilding. But the minister remembered what his teacher told him, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and that is before a
root goes up.
The root goes down before the ceiling on the plant goes up. So the minister was moving quietly. Well, when he would come to Detroit, they would call you on the phone, tell you he was coming. And you go to wherever they said that was going to be. If he couldn't make it, he would send Akbar. I remember him sending not only Akbar, he sent a brother George Sevenex, who was Abdul Hakim Muhammad, who eventually became the minister of Detroit. And brother Hakim at one point was minister in Connecticut, but he was in the ministry class of Malcolm with the minister, so they knew each other. And the brother was just a monster when it came to scripture. And back then, we used to always have question and answer at the end of a meeting. I was always amazed that no matter what the question was with regard to scripture, he'd go right to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught on that and give insight. So I assisted him. But in '81, Akbar, Brother Hakim, at that time George Sevenex, Brother Lenoir, who was out of Newark, I forget his holy name, it'll come to me, but I think he was Sister Ava's minister, but he came and he spoke. And there were a few others that I can remember during that time, but the minister only sent certain people to Detroit. So I made my acquaintance with Brother Akbar in Detroit and told him I was headed back to Missouri. And in fact, he was one of my guest speakers I brought to Lincoln University as well. And he did an exquisite job out. He went to the blackboard and he was illustrating what happened to the white folk in the hills and cave sides of Europe. And he talked about that board, putting them back and straightening them out. And he said that's why they had that shape. He went to the board and did that straight line. There was a brother I knew from Iran. His name was Hussein. He said, "I like that speech." He said, but he married a white woman for his green card. He said, "She didn't like it, but it's the truth." So it was that kind of experience. Fast forward back to Detroit. Brother Hakim asked me would I assist him. And I said yes, and I was in the ministry class.
So how did you become the student minister of Detroit?
That happened after some intense training. That intense training was Abdul Hakim Muhammad. When he was out of the post, Minister Farrakhan sent Brother Rasul into Detroit. Rasul Hakim Muhammad, messenger's son. Rasul asked me to assist him. I was already working in that capacity. He asked me if I would. So I worked with Rasul, but uniquely, Rasul never saw himself staying in Detroit. The minister had to convince Rasul to come in to Detroit because Rasul really didn't want to lock into the ministry at that time. He's a young man, he wanted to do things. He loved his music. The minister said, "Well, just help me for such and such an amount of time." So Rasul agreed, but Rasul absolutely fell in love with the believers there. And I think history will show that some of his greatest contribution in this stage was what he did in Detroit, because he really put the city back on the map. So I assisted him, and the whole time he was grooming me, wanted me to take on the post at some point when he was ready to shift. And the shift didn't come from him, it ultimately came from the minister sending him to the 7th region. And so when he was sent to the 7th region, he had indicated that I would be his best replacement. I don't know if he said best, but he basically told the minister me. Now, I was one of the few assistant ministers at that time. When there was a laborers conference, I was there. Because again, I'm being trained to administrate. And the thing that I always appreciate from Brother Rasul, he said, if we're not careful when we teach, that's just like performance. And you got to be as focused on administrating and managing as you are at expression. You know, because that's that balance that I'm sure you have faced in the ministry, managing affairs and administrating while at the same time the pastoral side, but ultimately the evangelical side that's absolutely necessary to grow this work, meaning moving out into the community and so on. So I thank him for that. So Rasul was given a new assignment, 7th Region. I was, my first event, Rasul asked me to coordinate the whole thing as if I were minister, is when we had the satellite downlink of the minister with Betty Shabazz in New York. When they had that meeting, I had to get the satellite service. I had to coordinate who was doing the flyers, attend anything that a minister would do. He told me that was mine, handle it. And he let me get out there and do it, and it was successful. We had the satellite downlink at a church, New Bethel. New Bethel is the church that was really what put Aretha Franklin's father on the map, C.L. Franklin. Anybody who knows preaching, and you talk about the eagle stirreth the nest, which is really a folk sermon that the way you cut your teeth is, if you could teach that sermon, then you were considered an exquisite preacher. Wow. And C.L. Franklin, he was the one, he grew in notoriety from just that sermon. Wow. But that was Aretha Franklin's father. Well, it was that church, New Bethel, where we had the first thing. And then when the minister was, when I took on the post, the minister came to Detroit, talked to the believers about Rasul's transition out of Detroit to Miami. And then at the very end, he brought me up and he said that, this would be my trial. He didn't make me the minister. At that time, his brother David X. He just told me that I had to go to work, and my work was in preparation for the Million Man March. So this was early in 95. So I had to really organize around the Million Man March. And Rasul had began the meetings. I was really not like ready to take on that post, to be very frank. It wasn't like, yeah, I can't wait. I was like, after working with Brother Rasul and seeing that the ministry was more than getting out there preaching and but dealing with all of the challenges of shouldering leadership responsibility, I really did not want to. I love to teach, but I didn't want to do all that other stuff. So I was moving kind of slow on the Million Man March when because Rasul was traveling back and forth between Miami and Detroit. It's like, brother, what's going on? He wouldn't have many reports. He had to almost lambaste me to really get me in the focus. So I took on the responsibility and really started focusing.
How did it, knowing that you were the student minister in Detroit, the place where Master Farah Muhammad came and really started doing the work, how was that, knowing that, and in your years of service in there, did you ever run into any people that actually had encounters with Master Farah Muhammad? And if so, what were those stories? Okay,
I'll deal with the first part of your question first and say, you remember the talk you gave earlier?
Yeah.
About self-doubt and not really? That would have been me. I love to teach, the applause, all that was nice. But when I thought of the magnitude, Master Farah Muhammad walked these streets, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his work. I would be a liar if I told you, oh yeah, brother, I was up for the challenge. I was like, dang, this is a lot. And then Rasul, I'm telling you, he didn't leave easy shoes to fill. That brother was responsible for filling up Joe Louis Arena in October of 90. And we had never filled up any venue that big prior to Rasul coming. I think the biggest venues we did, maybe we did something that did 5,000. But, you know, so just looking at the magnitude of the work, scale-wise, said, man, this is a lot. You know, like thinking you're a grasshopper in the land of plenty, something like that.
Yeah.
I thought that talk was exquisite. So, but then, you know, I just love what I do. And what you say about the love of Minister Farrakhan, you want to know what my prayer was anytime the minister was coming to my city?
What was that?
I'd ask Allah for one thing, that I can bring a smile to the minister's face. That was all. Because I knew if he was pleased, I did what I was supposed to do. So we really started working hard toward that. Now you had a second part.
About, have you ever come into
Yes.
people who met?
I'm going to give you two stories. Once we were out selling the final calls at a place called Eastern Market. It's the farmer's market in Detroit. And it was on a Saturday. It's very cold. You know, sometimes we bundle up one coat, sometimes two coats, long underwear, whatever. But we out there, we selling the papers. And there was this brother that walked up to us and he said, "Oh, you're in the Nation of Islam." He talked like, I'm not exaggerating. The brother, and it was myself and two other brothers. One of the brothers, he's a very kind of aggressive, pushy brother, but he had a good spirit. He said, "Oh, I know of this. I was in the ministry class with Elijah."
Wow.
And the brother said, "You in the ministry class?" He said, "Yes, I just got back from Morocco. It was a wonderful trip. I could walk at 11 o'clock at night without fear of being attacked. It was wonderful." Yes, I know about Elijah. And the brother said, "Didn't Master Father Muhammad stand him up before you all after you all chose who you wanted? He said that his choice was Elijah." He said, "Yes, I remember that."
Wow.
So I ain't gonna call the man a hypocrite, but in Detroit, not only is that the first mosque, but we got some Smithsonian hypocrites. It's been around a long time,
Wow.
and people will share their, but that, I remember that experience. There were maybe 3 or 4 others. The one who stands out most is Sister Mary Sharif. May Allah be pleased with her. She was a young teenage girl when she encountered Master Father Muhammad. And I was blessed to sit with her with Brother Jabril Muhammad as he interviewed her. And Jabril asked 2 questions. He asked many questions, but the 2 I remember is one question he asked is, "What was it like? How did you all feel when Master Father Muhammad was present?" Now, when Jabril asked him that question, I was sitting there with the brother who was our student captain in Detroit, Brother Majid Muhammad. Myself, his wife, my ex-wife, we were sitting there. And this was funny. So Jabril asked the sister, "How did you feel?" She said, "We were happy because before he came, nobody cared for us."
Wow.
I look at my captain, he wiping tears.
Brother Majid.
He looking at me, I'm wiping tears. The sisters were sitting there like, "That's beautiful." We over here all broke up. But, you know, they were relating with the sister, but it hit us a different way. Because it was so profound to us, because you could hear the depth of that experience coming in her voice.
Wow.
Then Jabril asked, "What was it like in a meeting?" She said, I want you to hear the language, because again, this is black folk, 1930s, many from the heart of the South, moving to Detroit for better lives, encountering Master Father Muhammad. She said, "Well, Professor Ford," she didn't say Ford would teach. Then Elijah Muhammad would teach. And then Professor Ford, and then Elijah. And Jabril said, So the teacher would give a demonstration, then allow his student to try, then come behind his student and show him how to perfect that, and then go on and teach.
Wow.
And she would talk about how they would go in the teach in the morning, but they would move around all the way into the evening teaching. So you had, those are folk I encountered. And one of the great blessings is we have a MUI in Detroit. We used to do an MUI walk every year. We're starting to do it again in Detroit. and there's a place called Bell Island. It's actually a park, but it's an island in the middle of the Detroit River. So you have to take a bridge from Detroit to the island. But it's right off of downtown Detroit. And so we had a walkathon. And we were blessed to have Sister Mary Sharif there. And symbolically, we had her and the youngest child born in the mosque pushed in the stroller. And so we had the eldest and the youngest to take the first step toward our educational future.
The sister who I think was her mother, I don't know if her mother was married to Mosai Elijah Muhammad's brother, Brother John Muhammad, Sister
Yes.
Bernstein. Did
Yes.
you ever have opportunity to meet her? She was the secretary of Master
I did, and she was a straight talker. I didn't have a lot of interaction with her. But her children, they still attend the mosque.
Yeah.
And Sister Medina is probably the one who comes most often.
Savior's
You all will see her at the
Savior's Day.
historic things at
Yeah.
Savior's Day. And it's from her family where all of those lessons got to the headlines when they did the Chicago Tribune story and all of that, and the minister was talking about it. It was John Muhammad and his wife, Sister Bernstein. Rasul would often talk about talks he would have with his aunt. For instance, I remember Rasul, I think, mentioning that Sister Bernstein said that Master Farooq Muhammad knew a professor. I don't know if it was language, it was English, or the person was a linguist, but he would have this professor, white man, in Grosse Pointe. Grosse Pointe is like one of the highest income places in the region where I live, in the country. A lot of wealthy folk live there. But Master Farooq Muhammad had rapport with that person where they would go over the supreme wisdom for syntax and making sure that grammar and all of that was right and exact.
Wow.
That's what Sister Bernstein, if I remember correctly, shared with Brother Rasul when he shared it with me. I was with Mother Tainetta Muhammad. May Allah be pleased with her.
She was from Detroit too.
Yes, and she, I was with her when she interviewed John Muhammad. She did an interview at his house, and she asked, it's really a blessing, I have to say, and it's really humbling to think that I just was blessed to be in proximity of some of what has occurred when people are getting historical stuff, because I love those kind of things. But Mother Tainetta asked John Muhammad, what was she and Brother Jabril, is very interesting, their line of questions. She asked, what was the meeting like? What would Master Farooq Muhammad teach? And she said, John Muhammad said, well, he would teach on things like that tuning in or that talking box in the head and such and such and such. And earlier in the day, this is very interesting, I was talking with Mother Tainetta, and I was sharing with her, I said, Mother, I was looking at lesson C1, and I noticed it says early in the lesson he cannot talk his own language, which I thought was an odd usage of language. Then later in the same lesson, it says they couldn't find anyone to speak the language. And I said, well, why talk here and speak there? So I went and did my little etymology search on the word. And talk actually comes from the word like tally. You tally something up, you're adding it up, you're counting it up. So you're dealing with a mathematical dynamic there. Another root for talk is tale. A tale is a story. A lot of tales were moral stories. Had a beginning, had a middle, had an ending. At the beginning, you set up the story. In the middle, there's a conflict. At the end, there's a moral conclusion. What happens if we can't talk our own language? It means we've lost a logical and we've lost a moral kind of insight where we can process things in the original way we would access it spiritually. This is what I was sharing with Mother, me talking to Mother Tainetta Muhammad, seeing if she would say yes.
Wow.
And she said, yes, brother. That's very interesting. Okay, that was earlier in the day. So later we were with John Muhammad. She's interviewing him. And when she asked him what would he teach, he said, well, he didn't say tuning in. He said, about that talking box in the head. And when he said talk, Mother looked at me, I looked at her, and we were like, So,
Process.
she continued to ask. She said, so it would be tuned in, yeah. And she said, well, I understand that he could bring images up in a glass. He said, yeah, he did that one day. And she said, he brought up the image of a man, and he had, I guess, a turban on the way John Muhammad described it. And he was looking at us. And Mother said, who was there? He said, everybody. It was a mosque meeting. Everybody came up and looked in the glass and saw it. And so, you know, I remember Mother having that discussion with John Muhammad.
Wow. So you had the opportunity, you know, being a student minister, I know the minister will go in and out of Detroit a lot.
Yeah.
Like, what are some of the most profound lessons that you've learned from the Honorable Minister Louis Farr, kind of like, or things that you personally witnessed as it relates to his love, his character, his courage, anything?
Well, you said something earlier today which I think is so important. You said when we're in the presence of the minister, he doesn't have a nasty or vile or ugly thing to say about people and their religion, their racial background, none of that. He doesn't sit up and say, let me tell you about these white people. Mm-hmm. Them darn Jews, that he never does that. Mm-hmm. I've never heard him do that. Mm-hmm. I can remember sitting in the suite with the minister. The minister was doing a little mini tour, speaking on what appeared to be this imminent war that George W. Bush was about to foster with Iraq. Mm-hmm. And so he was in Detroit, and we were watching the Senate as they were debating this whole weapons of mass destruction and all of that. And those who were for and against. And there was a senator who was speaking who, I don't remember his name, but this senator was speaking because his son was in the military. And it was a very impassioned speech. And he gave it, and me and my immaturity, I mocked. I was like, well, that was a good act. The minister said, he's not acting, brother. That man is sincere.
Wow.
You know, his ear is for what is right, what is sincere. He's never, he just doesn't have that nastiness. That, you know, when you talked about Netflix, I just thought about the Quran when I saw the Netflix weakened to pressure, because that was very clear to me. They want to censure the minister. Mm-hmm. Anytime you want to censure somebody, there's something in their speech that is of such a powerful nature that you absolutely want to seal it off from the ears of your public, because what he shares removes control. What he says about anybody, it's not just Jewish people. I find it very interesting. They always retell that story the same rotten way. And I would encourage all the believers, you owe it to yourself to go and study when that controversy with the Jewish community began and how it grew into what it is now. Because some of the younger believers don't know that history, and they should. And you know, you really can't be a Nation of Islam member and just be right now. You got to know the past, you got to know the present, and you got to know the future. That's why you say perfect tense, because you cannot jump in and out of time. You got to be properly on that time track, you Dianetic folk. But what that means too is that you have to understand that what you're a part of, you have to understand its past. You have to understand where it is presently, and you have to understand ultimately what its future has, because most of what we're doing today, we won't see it, but our children's children will see it as we establish. So I think that is critically important.
That was a powerful experience you said, but it shows the minister, more than likely that senator was white, right?
Yes.
And most people don't think like.
The minister was very sensitive to that.
Do you have any other?
I got a few others. I can remember the minister, we were having a leadership meeting, and we had all these folk together, and I was bringing on the minister, and I said, our leader, Minister Farrakhan. He got up, he said, brother, I'm not the only leader in the room. All of these people are leaders in their own right. And of course I said, yes, sir. There was, I'll tell you one of the most memorable moments. He went to see John Muhammad, Honorable Elijah Muhammad's brother. John Muhammad and the minister, they didn't necessarily agree on everything. everything. And John Muhammad had his own paper, he had his own, Detroit's a very interesting
Yeah.
place. We had good relations. Rasul even brought John Muhammad to speak at the mosque, and he and John Muhammad spoke that night. And John Muhammad said it his way, and Rasul came behind him and said it his way, and it's a very interesting evening, to say the least. But so I had a view, and I'm the kind of person, you know, if you ain't with the minister, you know, that's me, you understand? I don't care where I am, former minister, present minister, I love Minister Farrakhan. So you ain't with him, be careful if you're going to talk around me. That's just me. And in fact, one of my moments of pride, if you want to say I got a little, sitting at breakfast, we were having just coffee and juice with the minister. And there was somebody that wrote something crazy in one of the, because it was like two papers being, John Muhammad had his paper, then somebody broke with John Muhammad, they had their own paper, and they were attacking the minister and mother and little everybody. I said, Brother Minister, had I known that, I would have addressed it. He said, oh no, brother, you have a reputation for defending me. Do you know how good I felt?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Please. Because to me, the minister said something recently that we all have to bear witness to. He said, you can't say that being in the Nation of Islam, you have not benefited from something. Something. My life. I done had some raggedy stuff in my life, before Islam, after Islam, during Islam. But you will never, never get me to throw away what has been life to me. My children love Islam.
Yeah.
They know Islam. They don't care where daddy has been or where he's going. Their base for operation is Islam. But I'm going to get back to that story.
Yeah, give that story.
I saw that look on your face. He's going to forget about John Muhammad.
I wasn't going to let you forget about that, trust me.
But no, the minister was in town, and he was speaking, and it was John Muhammad's birthday or something, he found and he had met with the family, that side of the family. He had a big meeting with them. It was a beautiful meeting. He talked to them about how what they know is valuable, how he needs their help. And so it's very beautiful, beautiful talk. And then, in fact, well, I'll get to that later. So then the minister asked somebody to go out and find a gift for John Muhammad. And he told them what to get. I think he told them to get a sweater or something. So we went to John Muhammad's house. Man, folks were so happy. Folks were crying. It's very powerful, very intense meeting. This is at John Muhammad's house. John Muhammad sat on the couch. The minister went and sat on the floor and said to the brother, you the teacher, you have so much that you can share and give. And the minister don't play with people. He absolutely loved John Muhammad. Now I'm going to connect that to something I left out with the Mother Tynetta interview, but we'll hold on that. Because in fact, I think Mother's interview was after the minister went to see John Muhammad, several months after. But anyway, it was such a beautiful meeting. And there was eye water everywhere. Just a very powerful meeting. So we got back to the hotel suite. I went in the suite with the minister. I said, wow. This is all I said. Wow, that was something. Minister said, oh, brother, there was never any hatred. No, he said, oh, brother, he didn't say hatred. He said, oh, brother, there was never any loss of love. It was just a difference of opinion. He had read right into my consciousness. Because I wouldn't feel in nobody that wasn't with the minister. The minister was showing me, look, brother, we had some theological difference. We had some structural difference. We had some organization difference, but that's my brother and I love him. Boy, if we could learn that who are in the same mosque sometimes, in the same setting sometimes, we get so fixated on our position, we don't look at the bigger picture. But the minister said that. He said, oh, brother, there was never any love lost. It was just a difference of opinion.
Well, yeah.
Two other stories.
Go ahead. Then we're going to get to letting y'all ask some questions. Y'all all right?
Yes, sir.
I have two children that were named by the minister. And I look at the names he gave them, and I didn't really I told my children the meaning of their names. And, I don't tell them a little something, but I let them fill out things in life. You direct your children as best you can. but I didn't overdo it on what minister named you, therefore, you know. So I have a daughter, and he named her. And this I'm sure the sisters will appreciate. My daughter, my wife at that time, she went into labor. We were supposed to go to this birthing center ran by some midwives. I get in the car, we're zooming, we packed everybody in the car, we're zooming to the birthing center. She says, I don't think I'm gonna make it. Okay, so that meant make a U-turn. It happened I was passing the mosque. So I made a U-turn, pulled up in the mosque parking lot, opened the door to my office because it was right off the parking lot, went, got all the children out the car, went to the car, she said, I think I'm crowning. Okay. Look, she was crowning.
You know, I guess crowning mean like the head
The
is showing.
head is
Okay.
showing,
All right,
yes.
all right, all right.
See, the sisters knew that right off. Supposed to be like crowning. You got a royal child. So I reached in and I caught her just in time.
Wow.
And I had to suction her with, we didn't have an aspirator or a nasal thing. I had to suction her with my mouth to get the amniotic fluid out, wrapped her up in a blanket. And gave her to her mom. Right after she had the baby, the sister who was our MUI directress, who was also a pediatrician, pulled up.
Wow.
I told her the deal. She got her stethoscope, checked out everything, brought the baby into the office. We were good. And I cut the cord. I called the minister, told him about the baby being born and the experience. And I told him because I was on my way, he was teaching FOI, like the night before I was going to go, but the midwife said, you may want to stick around because the baby could come any minute. I've always been pregnant. When my babies were born, I was there. So I stayed. So I told the minister, I wanted to be there with you last night, but, you know, when the midwife said I should stay, I stayed. The minister said, brother, I'm glad you made the right choice. For those who can't see, on the other side of the camera, I was looking on the brother's side.
Right.
Now, that's a lesson sometimes we really need to learn about when to be present and what's really important. He said, I'm glad you made the right decision. So that experience, but he named that child Najma, and that means star. And he joked and said, she'd be the star of Islam. Do you know that child, no doesn't mean anything to her. And I thank Allah for her because she's taken a lot of stress off her dad. She's in college, and I mean, she has kept student loans to single digits, and when, you know, deal with scholarships or wherever she can find money for education, she does it. And she's been out of this country at least 3 or 4 times. She's been to Italy, Mexico. She went to Italy while she was in high school. So when you talk about star, you know, the minister named her. I didn't. But she shines so brightly and she inspires me. When she was going to college, of course I want all my children to go to college, but I told all my children, Daddy ain't got it like that. So y'all better be academically great so you can get scholarships. She listened. All praises due to Allah. The other ones, not quite, but they still doing some wonderful stuff. I'm proud of every one of my children. So that was one the minister named. The other one he named, we were sitting at the dinner table. I'm an artist. That's one of the other things I just love to do. And I sketched a picture of my son when he was born. I sat there and I sketched him. And I brought the sketch to the minister. It's kind of my way of telling the minister, I do art. At the same time, I asked the minister, could he name him? And he looked at the sketch a long time. And he said, name him Taqwa. Now, Taqwa, I said, I kind of knew the meaning of Taqwa, but I didn't want to assume I understood the full scope of that name. So I asked the minister, well, minister, what does Taqwa mean? And he chuckled and said to me what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to him when he named him about Farrakhan. And he said, oh, I got that in a book somewhere upstairs. I'll have to get that to you. And the minister laughed. I'm like, okay. This was naming my son, not me. Well, my life went on a trek where Allah showed me why the minister saw into my life and why that boy needed to be named Taqwa. When I showed the minister that picture of my son, I did not know at that time, because he was a newborn, he was about a week old. I didn't know he had Down syndrome. And if you study Down syndrome, you ever want to meet some of the sweetest, loving, most wonderful human beings in your life, meet somebody with Down syndrome. If you ain't getting no love, if you don't get no love from somebody with Down syndrome, I'm watching you as suspect. They're just very loving. And my son, he's 15. He'll be 16, inshallah, in October. But he's the most loving, sweet, and he don't let me out of sight. And he tells me he loves me every day. He knocks on my door either in the morning or at night and asks, can he give me a hug before I go to bed, without fail. And he loves who I love. But more importantly, the minister saw in his helper that he needed more God consciousness. Taqwa literally means to have fear of Allah because you're ever conscious of Allah's presence. Doesn't just mean fear Allah, and that fear is not anxiety-based fear. It's reverential fear. It's a loving fear that you don't want to disappoint who you love. And like you and mother this morning. Man, Islam really grows your nervous system where you can feel again, you know, and have a sensitivity and a humanity that is so vital. But his name being Taqwa, he's a constant reminder. Now, I sometimes got a mouth, meaning sometimes I curse. While I'm down south, I cuss. And my son, he'll be in the other room. If I let one slip, he'll be like, Dad! Like, okay, all right. Sorry. That God consciousness together. I heard a hadith. It really wasn't of the prophets, one of the Khalifa, I think. But there were questions, well, what is this taqwa? What does it mean? What does this fear of Allah, this God consciousness mean? And the brother asked his questioner, have you ever walked through a rose garden? He said, yes. He said, what do you do when you walk through that rose garden? He said, well, I gather up my robe and hold it closely to avoid the thorns. He said, that's taqwa. The minister saw his helper and saw I needed more of that. And so that son, anytime I call his name, if I'm thinking about it, if I think about who named him or the situation when he named him, it's always a reminder of the wonderful. I was so pained when I found out he had Down syndrome because as a father, you want your children's future to be one that doesn't require your presence all the time. You want your child to not be in a vulnerable state, to be mishandled, misused. You understand? But man, that boy has brought so much consciousness to me by Allah's presence in him.
I have a bunch of questions. So y'all have any questions? Okay, anybody else have any questions? I got some more questions I want to ask. Go ahead. I got some more questions. You want some water? Anything?
Yes,
We get some water out of my office.
What a beautiful journey and beautiful testimony.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you,
Yes, sir.
sister.
I just wanted to make sure I was hearing you correctly. You said, I think you were saying Mother Tanetta and somebody.
John Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
Do y'all know who John Muhammad is?
I believe I met him. Didn't they call him the Supreme
That's the most
Minister?
Elijah
Yes,
Muhammad's
that was
brother.
the
Yes,
Honorable
sir. He
Elijah
came to
Muhammad's
Memphis, Tennessee. That's
Yes.
where I'm from, and I met him.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I asked him about Master Father Muhammad. I wasn't even in the nation, but I
Ooh, I
heard.
got a story he told that I forgot. I'm going to tell y'all that one too, but go ahead,
My
sister.
question is, when you were saying something about this man and this glass or something, I wanted to be clearer. Can you tell me
Yes.
that again? Yes.
Master Father Muhammad could bring up an image in a glass. He could communicate with folk from other parts of the world, but he was doing it through that water, I guess, was the medium.
Wow.
But he could do that.
Wow.
From what John Muhammad shared with Mother Tanetta.
Wow, so you're saying that they saw a person in the glass, they saw an image in the glass. Is
Yes,
that what you're saying?
yes, that was looking back at them.
Wow.
Mhm.
forget that story. It was,
John Muhammad, they had a birthday celebration for him. I think it was like his 85th birthday, 86, it was something like that. And I can remember Brother Kamal coming in, Sister Fatima, a lot of believers came in, I was there. And John Muhammad, they had a reggae band, it was very upbeat. John Muhammad, you know, he smiled through the whole thing. Then it was time for him to come up and speak. And he shocked the room. It was one of the most powerful testimonies. I mean, you want to hear the testimony. And he said that they were at the house where the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was living in Hamtramck. Now, some of you, when you visit Detroit, that home is still standing. Now, there's two homes, two addresses he had. Those homes are not standing anymore. But there's one home that's still standing, and it's a two-family unit, and the woman who owns the property lives in the lower unit. But it's in Hamtramck, Michigan. Hamtramck is a little city that's kind of surrounded by Detroit. It had mainly a Polish population when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad lived there, and they gave black folk grief over there, boy.
Wow.
But interestingly enough, the name of the street is Yemen's Street. And you know, Yemen is an Arab nation and a Muslim nation. And it has, other streets with other names from the east. But interestingly, the Polish population has shrank, and now you have a larger Muslim population there. You have Yemenis there, and you have Bengalis there. Very large population. In fact, it was in Hamtramck where they started playing the call to prayer, and it created some controversy, and they finally just agreed that it would be religious discrimination, thank you, if they didn't allow them to do the call to prayer. Do any of you all remember a sister who was discriminated against in a store, and when she went to court, there was an open and shut case, she was going to win the case, but the judge said he needed her to remove her veil so he could see her face, to see if she was honest or not? This made national news. Well, that of course, that's not our community, but we got friendship in our walk of life. That brother and his wife, they're friends of mine. Detroit is that kind of city, though. Islam is so woven there. But, so John Muhammad, he said they were at the house in Hamtramck, Master Farooq Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and himself. They were sitting upstairs having a talk. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad excused himself and said he had to go down and pay the rent. And so he said that Master Farooq Muhammad looked at him and said, you know, John, you should go downstairs and kill that woman. The landlady. He said, you should go downstairs and kill that woman. You can imagine the room. It's like, is brother getting senile? Brother's mind was sharp. And he said, I had a knife in my pocket. I had a mind to do it. That's also an indication he wasn't quite all the way in yet.
yeah.
Right?
Wow.
He said he got up, he got ready to get up to go do it, and he said Master Farooq Muhammad froze his mind. He could not move.
Wow.
And then he said, you know, Elijah should be on his way now. And then he said, right after Master Farooq Muhammad said that, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you could hear him coming up the steps.
Wow.
And he told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, if you need somebody to do something, you want somebody to do it, let John do it. John will do it. John Muhammad shared that, right? That's one. Two, when Mother was interviewing him, Mother asked, well, you know, when Master Farooq Muhammad traveled, did you go with him? He said no. His wife Bernstein would go, Honorable Elijah Muhammad go, Master Farooq Muhammad would go. He said Master Farooq Muhammad told him, John, you stay here in Detroit. And Mother chuckled and said, you're still here. And that's when it hit me what the minister said about it was just a difference of opinions. In other words, John Muhammad was so fixed on his post.
Wow.
I mean, until that man died, he was fixed on his post. And profoundly, a week after the minister had went to visit with him, and He had met with John Muhammad's children and the extended family. One of his sons died, and it was the son that actually was behind getting everybody together to sit down with the minister. He died. I called the minister, and now this gives you the side of it with the minister, because you asked me about some things with him. I called the minister, told him about the brother's death. The minister said, well, unfortunately, I will not be able to attend the funeral, but I'll give you some words. And he proceeded to share with me. I was riding with somebody, and I had to have the brother pull over so there wouldn't be any noise so I could take down what the minister was telling me. And he shared with me his words that I should share at the funeral. And this was so beautiful and so profound. Afterwards, he said, brother, do you hear the tone I spoke to you in? I said, yes, sir. He said, use that tone when you speak at the funeral. Even the volume of our voice and how we should use it, how to give comfort to people. He taught me that.
Wow. And what was that tone like?
Like I'm talking to you right now. We have to be gentle. We can't scream at funerals and shout at people. Our voice can be medicine or it can be poison. And we have to learn how to have good ears. You know, if you ever hear I love music. I like jazz. You really, you know a good jazz group when you see how well they play off of each other. And one of the things that's always profound to me is when you get a good drummer who understands why they say a drummer should be felt and not heard. A good drummer keeps the rhythm. He doesn't overbear you with the rhythm. A lot of people don't like jazz because they listen to, say, hip-hop or R&B, and the beat is on the top. I mean, without the beat, you don't have it. But with jazz, the drummer is basically, particularly like bebop, he's keeping time on the cymbal. If you ain't paying attention to the cymbal, you're missing what's going on there. Not to mention the chord changes that may be going on in the solo and the piano comping, so you can understand where the saxophone player is going. There's a language going on there.
I know he liked that. He's a drummer.
So he understands that. So, you know, the minister, I once said to him, how he talks reminds me of a very well composed classical piece. I wasn't trying to compliment the minister. I was just telling him, because I've watched the minister start in a very gentle tone. He invites people into the dialogue, the discourse. And then he builds, and then you reach that crescendo, you know? And so in the ministry class, I used to make everybody, one of the easiest classical pieces to get into is bolero. But I would have them listen to it, because bolero is nothing but a repetitive melody that builds, with different instruments joining in. You know, and boom, boom, boom. Y'all heard that before?
No.
I'm out of tune, but
Okay.
you listen. But I would, anybody that wanted to be in my ministry class had to appreciate how that composition is made, because then you can reach the people's ears. Why? Because we are rhythm and vibration and sound. And we have to match that rhythm and vibration and sound with our listeners.
Brings me to a lot. Good. Any other questions? You understand? No?
Oh, okay. Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam.
So you were speaking about the college students.
Yes.
And so my question, not even just, staying in, but also trying to bring Islam with you, or especially like I currently go to a Methodist school. And we actually do have a reverend who is open to everybody and coming in, but a lot of people that are there, they're like, Islam is this, they have whatever notions they have. So being that you did go through that, because you did go to an HBCU as well, how were you able to make people more receptive to the changes, or actually just listening?
Treating people like I want to be treated. Now, I wasn't as skillful then. I think I carried a sledgehammer in one hand and a sword in the other. But I had a sense of humor, so I can talk to people. I was trying to convert everybody. And ain't nothing wrong with wanting people to be in your religion, but the best thing to do is to treat them like you want to be treated. Don't diminish your religion to make people comfortable. And don't be overbearing with your religion. Live your religion. The study guides are the best tools to use that can, and you know, not necessarily you can't have somebody in a study session, you just walking around interacting with people, but read those guides and gain insight from them. Because the minister really has shown us how to talk to people. There's universal language in the study guides. And always find a way to get people to yes. You know, the minister mentioned it, and Brother Hakeem, who was the first minister I served as an assistant to, he encouraged me to read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And a lot of times, it's the proper handling of people. No, it was Dale Carnegie's book that they got that from. Right. So just go on to the source and you can proper handle it yourself. Read the book. But how you treat people is very important. One of the things I learned with the believers, you got people who are not in the mosque because of theology. They're in the mosque because of it's a social outlet for them. And as soon as it gets rough, they're going to go someplace else where they can be social. You can throw rocks at them, but you got to understand, people have a basic need to be accepted and embraced. And so if you can be accepting and embrace them, they might hear you. Ultimately, we should be mature theologically. But I remember a brother came to the mosque. Some might criticize me for this, but this is the honest to Allah truth. I met him as he would do interviews for his church because they were going to the Million Man March. And of course, I was representing the minister. So television interviews, radio. The minister of his church would send him to do all the stuff. Well, he then came to me and told me he wanted to join the nation. I said, well, brother, out of respect to your minister, if you want to join the nation, you should go talk to your minister. Out of respect for the fact he's been having you come out here and speak on behalf of the church, you're a member of the church. If you're ready to make a transition like that, please go talk to your minister out of respect to him. You know where I got that from? My mama, a Christian, who told me to do that with the pastor. And when I went to the pastor and told him I am embracing the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he already knew it. I was coming to church, but I was leaving his church, going to the mosque right afterwards. He even tried to hold on to me and convince me to teach Bible school, Bible class with no curriculum. He just trying to hold me. You know, I love the guidance. I was blessed, though, because his church at that time was affiliated with Johnny Coleman in Christ Universal Temple. So I knew something of metaphysical, theological approach to the Bible. So that was preparation for my ears for Minister Farrakhan. So, you know, she told me to talk to the pastor, and I did. And he said, I release you to your highest good. And every Father's Day, guess who gave the lecture at the church? You know, and one of the last voices to speak to him was me when he was on his deathbed, because we kept a relationship, and it was respectful. So respect is like critical. If you're disrespectful to a person, what religion do you follow? And sometimes we're so disrespectful to people. You're not, anything that comes out of your mouth after you disrespect a person is not your religion, because you've disrespected who Allah wants. So what religion are you offering somebody you've just been disrespectful to? It makes no sense when you think about it.
Anybody else have another question before I ask mine? Okay, I got 3. I got 4. I told him, my wife always talks about her first Savior's Day. She heard you at a panel, and she always just talked about she liked the advice you just gave as relates to family and marriage. So as believers, you know, we really try to push family and marriage here in our minds, like from being married, and you mentioned you said you've been divorced as well. So what advice? So, well, give us some advice from both sides. What have you learned from both sides?
I've learned a lot. I've learned so much about myself, but that's internal stuff. But on a larger level, my first marriage, I stayed in that marriage as long as I could. And it's not that my first wife is wrong and I'm right, but because I realized there had been so many offenses, at a certain point to repair, it's almost impossible to do. Not that you can't, but if you lose respect, what do you have? There go that word respect again. But You know how you say, well, we're going to stay together for the sake of the children. Yeah, but don't be killing each other while you stand together for the sake of the children, because the children are going to say, for goodness sake, what is wrong here? Now, it was very traumatic for my children to experience their father and their mother divorcing. It was traumatic. And there's a price to be paid for that. And what I had to do is take whatever pain my children expressed in the way of their even sometimes being disrespectful to me. They never got too far out there, they didn't, but still, that was very difficult for them. So I still had to find a way to hold that together. And one of the most important things is not to badmouth their mother, not to convince them to take my side in the issue. If you want to be married to somebody, you have to really respect them. And love isn't just a warm, fuzzy feeling in the belly. Love makes you see that person the way they want to be seen, which means you got to develop ears. Love makes you patient and willing to work with a person despite some characteristics they may have that's a challenge to you. Love, though, if you don't love you, you're going to project so much expectation on your husband or wife, it is not just. Wow. It is not just. You must love you. If there's any aspect of love you don't have for self, it's going to be problematic. Sisters have, to me, a quality that they don't really realize is so powerful, but sometimes can hurt them. Brothers have a quality, very powerful, it can hurt you, and what is that? Brothers, you ever hear brothers say, you know, that sister right there, man, if she just gone and fix her hair and, you know, not wear them run-down shoes and talk so loud, I'd be interested in her. Why y'all laughing? Because brothers ain't like that. But a sister will say, look at him, afro crooked, ain't matching. We'll get them clothes matching. He ain't going to be no carpenter. He's going to be a contractor. See, y'all do that. So, if you meet a man and he start telling you what you need to fix up about yourself, run. Because really, when you come into a man's life, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, a man needs a woman that's going to help him meet the goal and the objective. But here's the kicker, sister. If a man doesn't know his purpose in life, good luck on that goal. Because we only understand where you fit into our lives when our goal is clear on what our purpose is in life. If a man don't know his purpose, and don't let no brother give you no general, well, you know, we all gods, and you know, Allah's God, and everything is real, sis, and I just want somebody that's going to be real with me. Run. What is his purpose with specificity? Can he say with specificity what he's born to do? Because if he can't, he might be lucky and you all might work it out. But, I mean, I think what has happened, Brother Willie, in my estimation, you know, we say how people set a high bar. No. The minister not only sets a high bar by example, but he shows that it realistically can be done. And when people see that, they want that, but they skip the steps. And then try and force it. You can't force it. You know, and let me say this. I don't really teach on male and female relationships. I just teach on relationships. Everything's a relationship. You know, with your children, husband and wife, with your brother to brother, sister to sister, it's all a relationship. And at the root of it, a truly loving relationship has at its core respect. I got my first understanding of respect was when I heard the minister say, when he did the Respect for Life series. And he said, re means again, and specto means to look. Respect means to look again. Again, what does it mean to look again? It means you've overlooked something, you've been careless, and you've taken something for granted. Look again.
Wow.
Look at your choices. You know, if you're criticizing the person you're with, you chose that person.
Wow.
So what's the real critique? Some auditing might help. You might find that you're projecting on that person what's going on with you.
Wow.
There's as much introspection you have to do I realized see that thing you said about fear and faith today? I mean, brother, I thank Allah for your talk, because I look at myself and I can remember being afraid of a certain you should never be afraid of your spouse. Now, brothers, I ain't afraid much, but yes, you are. Shut up. There's stuff you're afraid to say and afraid to do. If there's fear in the marriage, what kind of marriage is that? You can't speak freely. You can't be honest. You can't take critique. Constructive critique is not allowed. See, that's the kind of stuff. Now, see, that part, you can do that by yourself, can't you? I ain't saying not be with your mate. I'm saying that's some assessing you can do, some work you can do. Brother was talking about doing some self-auditing. Write that stuff out. Look at it. Go after it. Take it and burn it, meaning destroy your fear, overcome that, and go to work on it. But a lot of times, let me tell you something. It's not the right person for you if you can't tell the ugly, nasty, funky part. I have no fear of the woman I love talking to those that I fell out with.
Right.
I have no fear of that. Because I've decided I want to be free. I've decided that if you know the ugly side of me and you still want to be with me, you must be the one.
That's right.
But I know I don't have a license to stay ugly. Well, you said, no. That's contingent on cleanup. You know, so we have to be very mindful with that. So I would say that relationship-wise and marriage-wise, I'll never give up on marriage. I got married a second time, but I tried to deny myself where I thought I was immature. But you don't do that with another person's life. And when I realized, this will not work and I'll hurt this person, I had to end that. It didn't go real well, but you know what? I strove to give that sister as best a send-off as I could give her. When I say send-off, you done moved out of state and all that, you need me to give you some finances. And I did that. She still wanted to remain married, but I wouldn't have been a good person for her because I did something out of haste. I decided I would never do that to somebody else's life. So I don't mind sharing that part of me. Why? Because there ain't nobody in here pure and holy, and if you is, I know you ain't judging me. You're blessing me and giving me your blessing. Thank you for that sprinkle. You understand? So, I ain't speaking with no fear. None. What you said about fearing Allah and Allah alone, man, we waste so much time worried about who gonna bring the kibosh down on me. Ain't nobody gonna bring it down but the God, ultimately. But Allah is so merciful, He allows you to make decisions, even though they're stupid. But you'll remember Allah, and I'll give you yet another experience with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Yeah, give it to
I went to him, sharing with him my woes in the ministry, and shared this and shared that and shared the other. He gave me advice. And I tried to share more. He said, son, if I let you keep talking, I'm going to have to bust you. He wouldn't even let me share my sins. I'm sitting there, and he told me, he said, Allah, he said, Master Father Muhammad did not study all those years so he could come to judge us. He knew before he got here the depth of our sin and depravity. He did not come to judge us, he came to save us. I just cried because that was love. And he said, now you see how I'm talking to you and handling you? He said, you go back and you do that with the believers. That's the kind of man Minister Farrakhan is. Woo.
Man, I gotta give you a pound on that. Y'all wanna have another question? I got some. All right. You better ask why you're here. So, you mentioned when you talked about how you were scheduled to go to FOI class, but when the sister told you you might want to hold up because your wife will be. But then you mentioned and you came back and you said about knowing the importance of being present.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And sometimes I think like we don't realize like how much of a mystery God that we allow to be a part of our principles that we use to build our family. Like, you know, you really have to put time and cultivate it.
Oh, yes, sir.
So can you
Yes,
talk
sir.
just from your experience in regards to the importance of being present and spending that quality time with your children?
Really,
with
you
your
just
family?
said it yourself, man. What you just said. I'll say this. The dinner table is one of the most powerful things you can have as a believer. As a human being, period. You know, there are believers that don't eat dinner together. And, oh, it got quiet. I don't care how busy you are, if you can't eat dinner together every day, at least once, twice, thrice a week, you have to do it. Why? Because that's where your power is. You sit at that dinner table and you can look, I mean, sometimes I know children are driving you nuts. You want to just take your plate to the bedroom, watch some TV. I understand. Did that before too. But ultimately, that dinner table is really going to save your family and save your future. You sit there at that dinner table, you have discourse. You talk about different things. If you know that a child did something, you don't go after just the child, just talk on the principle and study to see if that principle is sinking in. I mean, I've been at the dinner table of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and that's really what made me want to go home and make sure we start doing dinner together more often. Because I was so filled with the Holy Spirit after leaving the National House. I mean, the minister, you don't sit at his table and not be fed. I mean, spiritually. You don't sit at his table and not get guidance, but get compassion, get warmth. I mean, it's a very powerful experience. And the minister, if he needs to address people on some things that may be addressed at the table, but like he said, he never puts us through the test that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad put him through. So if anybody tells you otherwise, they ain't lined up with him. Because he doesn't do that. In fact, I know for certainty that that man knew how much and knows how much I can take. And he never pressed me harder than what I can take. Can we say the same with how we deal with our children? I know there were times where the minister could bring it down on me, but he knew it would crush me. So he just did enough where he knew that would shake me to do what I was supposed to do. He's not an abusive man. He's not some arrogant egomaniac. The man is loving. And he looks at every soul like a rusty lock, and he's looking at what's key going to work on that one. He doesn't give everybody the same treatment because we're not all the same. That's what the dinner table is for. But that's where your time is spent with your family. Yes, you got, if you can't afford a vacation, go take a walk. No, I'm serious. Hold hands, go take a walk. Let me tell y'all what I did with my children when the divorce came. Children were with me at the time. I came home, made dinner every day. Now, I'm only saying this for the principal, not to put any spotlight on me. But I came home, I made dinner every day. I had to get up on my bean soup skills because, children can be some rough
bean
critters.
water, huh?
Dad, you might want to do this. My bean soup is tight now. I'm ready, brother. But after dinner, every day, because one of my sons, he was absolutely angry about the whole affair. And he tried to not do something. I'd make everybody get up from the dinner table and we would go for a walk. Everybody. Every day, because I had to bring some normalcy to the environment, some consistency. I had to take a lot, and I'm saying this even if you're a couple, if you just start having dinner again, well, we got to do this. We did this, do it anyway. Don't listen to them children. You still paying the bills, right? They're still under your roof, right? And then you learn how to talk to each other when you're in a civil setting, So do things together. Make memories. Make memories. You have to consciously decide, my child may remember this day. My daughter, she graduated. She had a prom. Both my daughters, at that time, the older daughters, they had their proms. But one of them, because MUI, we got overwhelmed. We had to reduce grades down. We had to put the children in other schools. So I had a son and a daughter, both in high school. Both of them are going to graduate around the same time. So My daughter, when it came time for her prom, everything she needed, I paid for it, I took care of it. My son, because he worked with one of the believers, carpet cleaning business, and he really hustled. He cut hair, he did it all. I didn't help him as much. And so we have this Men and Boys Day in the mosque every year where we take the brothers out to the park and sports and swim and all that. So my son and I, we were out in the middle of a lake in a canoe. I said, son, I know you are looking at how I treated Akila, which was his sister. You feel like I did more for her prom than I did for you, don't you? He said, yep. I said, you're absolutely right. I did, on purpose. I said, because I want for her that any man that comes into her life, this is what he has to be mindful of for her. I want for you that you understand that any woman's life you come into, you got to man up. He didn't argue with me no more, didn't fuss. He understood, and we kept canoeing. So in time, you got to give to your children. The minister said something to me that he said he noticed that my children are active in the mosque, and it really, he really appreciates and it makes him feel good when he sees that the believers' children are taking on the work. You know, so several of my children are very active in the mosque, and they love this guidance. And despite wherever I failed or where they believe their mother failed, they saw that Islam is something that both parents gave them, and they have not let go of the handle of Islam. I got one daughter, she doesn't go to the mosque at all, but when I look at how she rears her children and conducts herself, I know that Islam is in her. And you know, don't give up hope, believers. We are a small group in a big flood. You understand? The ark was not a big boat. It was big enough for what was surviving, but there was more that died than what survived. So understanding, when you're in the ark, if you look out of the ark and you linger there too long, I heard the minister say that they were building that ark, and Noah's son looked and said, Dad been preaching about this flood for hundreds of years. Ain't been no flood. He want me to get down into that funky ark with them animals and stuff. He said, as soon as he took his eye off the work, then he got lost. You all have to realize that even if your children don't do exactly as you want them to do, you still got to be that anchor and that rudder. You got to hold things together, and you got to guide things on the right course. And don't let your children guide you, you guide them.
2 more questions, if y'all don't have any. So, 2. 1, can you tell, we'll close out on this. How it happened that the Ambulance Louis Farrakhan gave you your holy name, and then we'll just close out whatever personal advice that you have for believers that can help us, because like you said, we are a small group and we're in this flood, and it's a challenge.
Sure.
You know, especially like a city, I'm saying other cities, but definitely like a city in New Orleans, it's a challenge. And what you face from family, what you face from your job, like what you face from just being a Muslim, and then you come into the mosque or the study group and you can have difficulty. And before I make that, it's one of the beautiful things about these testimonies, because you said something that verified what Brother Akbar said last week about how the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, one of the things the minister knew when the Most High Elijah Muhammad said, when you're building something, you put a piece of wood in a corner.
Yes.
When you see it about to bend, you would move it and put something else.
Sure.
And what you just said verified what Brother Akbar also said about that quality of the minister, where he knows where you don't put too much on a person that may be too much for them to carry. So how did you get your name? And then we'll close out on with any personal advice.
I got my name working on the Million Man March. And I mean, I worked. When I finally got my mind to, okay, I'm taking on this responsibility, we went to work. And there was no place that I was invited to speak where I didn't speak. The momentum was building for the march. I always believe if you're going to get folk to come to an event, and if the venue seats 5,000, you better put out 20,000 flyers. And my captain would always say, if you want to know how well an event will be attended, look at the paper sales. Because if your papers are sold, you're informing the people that you're present, and when the minister comes, then you already got folk are willing to give money, they're willing to give them a little time to give ear. But so we would gauge by paper sales and all of that. So I was really pushing hard. Well, the minister was speaking at New Bethel, which was Aretha Franklin's father's church, historically. So we packed it. Minister, he said, how many flyers did you all put out, brother? And I told him how many. I think the church seated like 4,000 or 5,000. I don't remember, but he said, how many flyers did you all put out? I said, 15,000, sir. He said, son, are you trying to create a riot? I said, yes, sir. And what I did with the believers is I asked them to visualize the church being full. We sat, and everybody close their eyes and visualize the church being packed from top to bottom, that the church was packed around the building, that it was completely just full everywhere you look. And then we went to work on it, and Allah blessed us with success. And the minister, when I brought him on, and by the way, I got beat up by Stephanie Mills at the end of that meeting, because she said, you should have called me, let me know, and I would have sang for the minister. And I said, I'm sorry, with a little self. She's powerful though, but she did tell me that. So the minister, when he came out after I brought him on, he said, Brother David, I stood up, he said.
Your name was David.
David X. He said, a man that do the kind of work you do can't be called David X. He did this in front of everybody at the church. He said, from this day forward, you'll be known as Dawud Muhammad. Now, when he did that, getting his blessings publicly like that, you see, it was transition. Rasul was shifted down to Miami. They just knew me. That's his assistant. Folks, some even in doubt that he could carry it. And, you know, people are personality driven. Well, by him giving me that blessing in front of all those people, I was in Targets one day in line. That's the one Farrakhan name right there. There's no greater blessing.
Yeah.
And there's no curse to that. So he named me, and my mother was present. And one of the things I'm most thankful for is my mother was moved to tears when she saw that. And from that day, she never called me anything other than Dawud.
Wow.
I never had to say, but mom, such and such. No, my mother embraced that. And anybody that didn't embrace that, shame on me. I ran into some old classmates one day. David, I said, well, it's Dawud now. Well, I knew you as David. I said, well, my mother calls me Dawud. Okay, how you doing? Yeah, tell them, my mama said. Big old 50-some-year-old man having to tell somebody that.
So, and what advice would you give to believers, to all of us, in regards to what we can, as the Most High Elijah Muhammad said, hold fast to the handle of Islam?
Yes. I would say this, that you really have to learn to remember. Remember before you had Islam, what it was like for you? Remember before you had How to Eat to Live? Sister gave a beautiful presentation on How to Eat to Live. Remember you didn't have that? Remember when you did not have friends in all walk of life? Remember the first time you heard this guidance. Remember the first time you heard or saw the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan or the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Why is that important? Because sometimes there's no continuity in our thought process. We get so overwhelmed by what is now, we don't remember. Say, well, the numbers. I can remember in 1981, we was the first big venue the minister did in Detroit. We had maybe 1,200 people or something. It wasn't huge, but the minister was building. And so I would say, one, remember. I would say, number two, pray. And give yourself time for reflection. I would say that gratitude is probably one of the greatest motivators to keep us going. Because if we're ungrateful, then we really don't see very well. That's why I said remember, but gratitude is such a powerful thing. You can be like really, really in a bad state. But I guarantee you, if you took a little piece of paper and wrote it, or just thought about everything you're grateful for, I sometimes am talking with people and they'll be in a really bad state, and I ask them, what are you grateful for? Says, tell me something else. Says, well, what else are you grateful for? And we'll keep going. They'll try and give some resistance, like, you trying to trick me. Just keep going. And after a while, with your gratitude, you'll balance yourself out to see better. You know? So we don't thank Allah enough, in my opinion. You know, the minister, when he started rebuilding the nation, and even to this day, but the more thunderous the applaud would get, the more the minister would say, all praise is due to Allah. I thought that was just a thing Muslims say when I joined the nation. I didn't realize the minister was securing himself in Allah, knowing that any praise or anything that people are giving him, the praise belongs to Allah. And by him praising Allah, it fueled him to continue to serve Allah. So I think that is important. The minister said something recently, he said it before, but sometimes we forget it. And that is that it doesn't require a title for you to help in this work. You know, the titles were to designate responsibilities, not to make you, and what you are made into is a Muslim. It's the most important thing you can be. And be that, and then thank Allah and give Allah the praise, and find something to do constructive every day, even if it's a little thing. Say a kind word. Now I've been teaching, sometime I don't want to drive to the airport, I take an Uber. And I got an Uber the other day, and so I go to the window, I said, you're my Uber? He said, yes, brother Dawud. In my mind I was like, did he say brother Dawud? And I got on in the car. He said, yeah, who wouldn't know that you were the wonderful brother Dawud, shining like you? And I'm like, who is this dude? He's just a guy from the community. I haven't been a minister in years, but he remembered a little work I did. Which leads to what I'm going to say to every soul in here. People are always watching you. And you're doing things, and they're depending on you. They are. There are people who set their watch to you. They know what corner you're going to be on selling your paper. They know what time you go to your MGT class every Saturday, see you walking out. Come here, there they go. Look at them, and the key is to, oh! People are being inspired by you. They'll test you to see if you are with what you say you with. You know, because you say you're in that life, they want to know, so they'll press you. But when they press you, they're pressing because they want that you come back with, yeah, I really am this. I am really striving to be this. You're inspiring people all the time. I get stopped so often. I ain't been a minister in years. You still teach? I still teach, but it's on occasion. And oft times I'm just moving around doing what I do. But it's because of serving that Allah has opened doors for me, and He's going to continue to open them for you. Don't think that what you're doing is not having effect, is what I'm saying. It is. You want more effect, you still got to do it one by one, two by two. You got each individual. Brother Willie, when he took up acceptance, he shook the brother's hands who stood up and he said, who invited you? And I was looking to see. Because see, that's significant. It's a soul here, but what motivated that soul to come into the door? You all have a beautiful house here. I love it. It's clean. It's just, it's crisp. The eatery downstairs, everything. I'm impressed, you know. I'm going to brag about y'all in the D. They're going to be jealous. But you don't know the effect you're having until somebody comes to tell you. And, you know, the minister said, you really don't remember all the good you do. But the evil, you don't forget that. So I'll share this little story in closing. It was really a rough day I was having. It was a rough time in my life. This is after I'm out of the ministry. I'm walking down a street. And I avoid main streets. And again, I say this just because it actually would happen. I could not walk anywhere, be anywhere, and people weren't stopping me. You know, when you work and do the minister's work, folk remember you, man. I start not liking being acknowledged because I just sometimes like my space. So I would take walks because that gets the stress off, but I would stay away from main streets. So I decided I got to go down this main street to get to where I'm about to go. As soon as I step out on Main Street, somebody said, hey, got off a bus. Brother ran up to me, hey, how you doing? And he reminded me of something I helped him with years. I had a restaurant. He reminded me of something I helped him with years ago. I said, brother, you missing your bus? He said, I got a bus pass, but I was not going to miss this opportunity to walk with you.
Wow.
So you just don't know the effect you're having on people. Don't doubt. Allah is using you. Allah is using you. You know, in the Quran, where it says peace is secured through strength, that's what Maulana Muhammad Ali calls this section. But it talks about tying your horses at the frontiers. Do you understand what that means in the Quran? It's really saying if you got 5 men, tie 10 horses at the frontier. Why? Because if the enemy comes see 10 horses, they'll say, oh, they fortified with 10. I thought it was only 5. You don't understand, as FOI and MGT, you ever notice how many head turns and you by yourself walking through a store? Or how folk start getting shamed, sisters start working on their clothes and you just walking past?
Yes, sir.
Or somebody see you as the FOI and they pop tall, hey brother, you know, you don't realize that you are the fortification. Our numbers look far larger than they are because Allah magnifies us by 10 if we'll line up with Him. Because we ain't nobody except we submit, but when we submit, we grow exponentially.
Wow.
I work at a college, and oftentimes I may be asked to do things, but all of what I'm drawing from came from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in terms of the training, organization, and all that. I got that from the Nation of Islam, and everybody know that. You a Muslim? Yup. Nation of Islam, that's right, Minister Farrakhan. You know, what else? You know, so people have asked me to do things. Some things I've embraced, some things I've turned down, but they wouldn't have known me had not a Georgia-born black man been touched by Master Fard Muhammad that touched Minister Farrakhan. Man, we got a powerful guidance. We are a powerful community. We can go anywhere in the country. We have our own customs. We have a way that we dress, a way that we greet each other, a way that we eat. I remember reading in the African Mirror magazine, it said that Elijah Muhammad single-handedly gave black people something in America they did not have, their own culture.
Wow.
We better appreciate what we have.
And then you took a picture while you was... Yeah, you was. So I know you ain't taking any pictures. I know you were caught up. Here you go. But while he's doing that, I know you say you wanted to buy, but you blessed us with what you said today. And every one of these testimonies has its own uniqueness. But I just like, man, this had to be like the most spiritual.
You know, I forgot something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anybody who knows me.
Well, let me give you. This is our gift to you. All right.
Thank you. And you know, I was more than happy to purchase.
Oh, I know
I saw
you
this
were.
on y'all website. I said, oh, I got to get that.
It's our gift to
Praise
you.
be to Allah. Thank you.
Thank you. It tells that story.
Hold on. Where was it?
Oh, man.
I think I lost it. Oh, testimony.
Okay.
I love that you named this series because one of the things I tell anybody that's close to me knows this. I always say there's nothing more powerful than a testimony. You can lecture till the cows come home. Some people are very eloquent, very good at how they speak. All that is nice. But if you ain't got a testimony, do you really have the faith that you claim you have?
Wow.
That's all I got to say.
Thank you. So your son is here in Xavier. So let him know whatever he needs. Give us a call. I'll give you my number and give it to him. So
Thank
we're here for. Thank you all as well.
Thank you.
And we'll make sure you get a copy of this, and when we get out, so
Please.
we'll upload it and put it online for people.